We're joined by Lee Hamilton, who is the director of the Woodrow Wilson International Center, former member of the House, served from 1965 until 1999, and the former chairman of the House International Relations Committee. Good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
You also served on a committee with two former senators, Warren Rudman of New Hampshire and Gary Hart of Colorado, that looked at terrorism.
Yes.
Did last Tuesday's incidents surprise you?
We all anticipated, members of the commission, that there would be a massive attack by terrorists on U.S. soil, and that the Americans were not as secure as they thought they were, and that we would receive casualties. We did not anticipate, of course, this particular kind of terrorism, the hijacking, striking the World Trade Towers and the Pentagon. But we were not surprised by a terrorist attack on U.S. soil.
Do you have any fear that in the short term we could see more of this?
I think it's just not predictable. I do not know what will happen in the short term. I think it is quite likely somewhere in the world there's a group of men sitting down to plot another attack on the United States of some kind. The pattern of the terrorists in the past has not been to repeat the same kind of mode of operation that they used in the previous attack.
Senator, Congressman, I'm going to stop for just a moment. We're literally going to change microphones, if you don't mind,
right.
because I think we're having some problem for our audience. And so you can just, the microphone is, just try to get it. Is it right here? We'll have our technician come right in.
Okay.
And then we'll start over again.
Okay.
We apologize for that.
That's all right.
Live television, folks. While we're doing that, let me just show our audience one of the stories this morning from USA Today. It is from French press that says that a bold move could be quite challenging for Musharraf, who is the president of Pakistan. He learned a lot about survival in his days as a commando with the nation's elite special services group, and he has shown canny political instincts since taking control of his country in a bloodless coup nearly 2 years ago. He has been the ruler of Pakistan since October 1999. Again, that story this morning from USA Today. Congressman Lee Hamilton, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us. What's next when it comes to international terrorism? How can we prevent it?
Well, we have to do a lot of things to prevent it. We certainly have to let the world know we're not going to take the kind of a blow that we took on September 11th, that we will retaliate, and that we will retaliate very forcefully. I don't know exactly what military measures we will take, but I think we will take very aggressive and robust measures, and that the American people and the Congress will support that. But of course, military strikes alone will not do the job. We're going to have to greatly increase homeland protection. That means supporting security measures at airports. It means protecting the critical infrastructure of the country, electrical systems, water systems, all kinds of grids. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've got to increase our intelligence capabilities. Many things have to be done to try to prevent these attacks. We'll have a lot of victories in the war on terrorism, but we should not think it will be easy. And the likelihood is, as I think most people are now coming to realize, is that it'll go on for a long time.
Did the commission that you were part of with Senator Rudman and Senator Hart make a difference? Did Congress, did the Clinton or Bush administrations read the report, come back with any recommendations based on what you were suggesting?
I think there were several reports in the past 2-3 years that have heightened the attention of Washington policymakers to terrorism. Ours was certainly one of them, but not the only one. And when the Bush administration came in, I think they indicated an interest in that report. I think Vice President Cheney has developed a task force to review the recommendations of the report. I'm not sure just where those recommendations are. After September 11th, our report became a bestseller, in effect, and it's had very wide distribution and very close attention.
What were your recommendations?
Well, we made many recommendations, but one of the things we said was that the federal government is simply not well organized to deal with terrorism. It's too fragmented. And that we recommended that a single person be put in charge of the war against terrorism or counterterrorism, and that that person be a member of the cabinet and report directly not through someone else, but report directly to the President. Then we recommended shifting a lot of boxes around, creating a new agency, a National Homeland Security Agency, trying to focus the federal government on this threat of terrorism. And those recommendations now, I think, are being looked at very hard.
Who made up this commission?
Oh, there's a marvelous commission. It was originally the idea of Speaker Gingrich. It was supported by President Clinton. Senators Rudman and Hart were the chairman, co-chairman, but we had a wide variety of participants. Speaker Gingrich, we had several military people, we had liberals, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, moderates. It was across the board, and the remarkable thing was that the recommendations were unanimous.
When did you meet, how often, and when did you make your final recommendation?
We met over a 3-year period. We had dozens of meetings, and we made our final recommendations in March of this year.
And with those recommendations, you said in addition to this individual or this department that would respond to the President directly or report to the President, what else are you suggesting?
Well, we're suggesting that, for example, the National Guard play a much, much larger role in homeland defense, that the National Guard take on homeland defense as a primary responsibility. We suggested that Customs and the Border Patrol, the Coast Guard, come under the National Homeland Security Agency. So we shift a lot of boxes around in the federal hierarchy, the federal bureaucracy, all with the purpose of focusing the organization of the government and the people of the government and the White House on the question of terrorism.
There is this analysis last night we've been showing our audience the BBC Newsnight program as this coalition comes together with European and other countries. And the analysis was if you throw a stone in a pond, you get a ripple effect. The tiny circle will be U.S., Great Britain, Canada. Then it would be surrounded by NATO allies, and then further out in this ripple analogy would be countries like Saudi Arabia and other more moderate Arab nations. My question to you, if you continue with that analysis, how strong of a coalition will this be, and who can we trust?
The President has a very formidable task in putting together this coalition. He wants the coalition to be as broad as possible. The problem with a broad coalition is that you tend to dilute, you tend to go to the least common denominator in developing a response to terrorism. We must not permit that to happen. The United States must stay in control, if you would, of this coalition. There are risks in building a coalition. One risk is that countries will try to piggyback on the coalition. That is, they'll try to take their particular foreign policy concern and make it part of the coalition effort. That tends to dilute the effort. And the other big risk, of course, is that you weaken the effort by broadening it. The President has to take all that into consideration. Your ripple analogy makes some sense to me. There's a lot to it. However, I suspect countries on the outside of those ripples, on the far reaches of it, might be some of the moderate Arab countries, Pakistan, and maybe even some of the former countries in the Soviet Union. Those countries will become immensely important to us in our efforts against terrorism.
And as you probably know, some of these Islamic clerics who reportedly have met with bin Laden over the last couple of days have basically said, leave Afghanistan. What's the politics behind these Taliban leaders saying to Osama bin Laden, you know, we're telling you to leave?
I doubt very seriously if the Taliban leaders will permit us to have access in any way to Osama bin Laden.
Is it giving them political cover, though, by saying we're telling him to leave, it's not our fault?
Well, they're trying to avoid any kind of attacks on Afghanistan itself. Now, they haven't given us an answer yet. We don't know for sure exactly what their answer is going to be. But if they do give us a positive answer of a sort, it'll be highly conditional, and I suspect the conditions will not be satisfactory to us.
Lee Hamilton is a former member of the House. He joins us and will be with us until the top of the hour. What is your background? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Born in Florida, moved to Indiana as a young boy, grew up in Indiana, went to school at DePaul University, got my law training at Indiana University, practiced law for a few years, ran for Congress in 1964, and served 34 years in the Congress.
What is the Wilson Center?
The Wilson Center is a living memorial to Woodrow Wilson. Wilson was the only president of the United States that had a PhD. He believed that the scholar and the policymaker could work together in what he called a common enterprise. And we bring in post-PhD people from all over the world and try to give them an opportunity for study on public policy issues. And, this is the key, to interact with the policy community on the theory that from that interaction, better public policy will emerge.
As America moved into World War I, Woodrow Wilson was president. What did we learn from that period?
Well, that was the period when America began to really assert its role as the world leader. Wilson was a visionary. He was an idealist. He is usually ranked among the great presidents of the United States. I think principally because he saw America's role in the world and recognized that we had to take a leadership position in it. He, Teddy Roosevelt, perhaps before him, were the two presidents that really led us into the position of leadership in the world.
Let's get a call from Cherry Point, North Carolina for former Congressman Lee Hamilton. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm calling basically to, I was wondering if the federal government is going to support advancing the security in airports and most likely in the local populace, how much more effort are we going to put into adding adequate training to the local security, such as local police departments, so on and so forth. And we put a lot of time inside our federal bureaus, ATF, DEA, FBI, CIA, and they get adequate training. But how about at the local level? I don't see the training there. Of course, it's there for the military, but the more people involved, the better off we'll be.
Thanks for the call.
I think the caller puts his finger on a very important point. Homeland protection is not just a matter for the federal government. The federal government can do a lot of things, and as Senator Hutchinson was mentioning a moment ago, certainly expanding airport security is going to become a federal responsibility. But Homeland Security means that the state and the local levels have to do an awful lot of work as well. Our communities, as we found out to our distress, are much more vulnerable than we thought them to be. Not only do we have to try to protect those communities and prevent these things from happening, but we also have to develop in all of these communities a response mechanism. That's a complicated matter. It is not just law enforcement. The caller is absolutely right. You've got to strengthen law enforcement. But you also have to strengthen all kinds of other efforts. Medical, for example, the medical community plays a critically important role in response to these kinds of matters. And if you look at the New York case, one of the things that has really struck me is how many talents and skills are needed to recover from a terrorist attack like that. My goodness, you need firemen and policemen of all kinds. You need engineers, you need architects, you need all kinds of public health people. These things our communities are going to have to get geared up for.
Lee Hamilton is also a former member of a commission looking at national security in the 21st century. Next call, Santa Clara, California. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I'm glad you have a great guest on now. I wanted to get through to Kay Bailey Hutchinson, who I used to support. When I hear people like her say that nobody anticipated this, I just absolutely want to scream. Everybody anticipated this. There were half a dozen committees that said this was inevitable, and I think that if she and these other people in those positions had any integrity now, they'd resign and let somebody competent start serving. Slick Willie emasculated our CIA 5 years ago with this stupid, goofy pronouncement that we couldn't deal with any informants if they had a criminal record. It's just absolutely nuts. I just hope and pray and really believe we have a president now who will do his job.
Well, we all hope that the president will do his job, and I think the president is doing his job. I've been impressed, really, by the manner in which President Bush has led, and I think all Americans want to support him in this very, very grave challenge.
From the LATimes.com website reporting this morning that both FBI and CIA officials were advised in August that as many as 200 terrorists were slipping into the country and planning what they called a major assault on the United States. We know that now, of course, after the fact. When the CIA or the FBI gets this information, what do they do with it?
Well, I don't know specifically what that information is. There's going to be an awful lot of second guessing here. We have to have some appreciation of the task we give the intelligence community. We ask the intelligence community to let us know what's happening in every country of the world. We want to know about every leader of the world and his or her intentions. And we want to keep track of all kinds of armaments and armies and movements of armies. And we certainly want to try to keep track of terrorists. Now, the terrorist is a very tough target for the intelligence community. There isn't any doubt that we have made some mistakes, and one mistake, as everybody in this town acknowledges, is we put too much emphasis in intelligence on technology and not enough on human spies, or what they call human. I think one of the things, I'm sure, one of the things that will come out of all of this is that we will restructure our intelligence community, putting much more emphasis on human intelligence. Having said that, no one should think that we're going to penetrate easily the inner circles of any terrorists, Osama bin Laden or anybody else. It's a different culture, it's a different language. They're highly hostile towards anyone who has any connection with America. They operate very close-knit group, the toughest of all intelligence targets to penetrate. So let's do everything we can to prepare to do that, but let's not have exaggerated expectations. And let us understand that the terrorist's a pretty sophisticated, wily guy, and he knows where our defenses are and where they were not, and he found a weak spot, a real weak spot in our defenses. Keep in mind also we've had a lot of successes in preventing terrorism. We had this massive failure.
Kenner, Louisiana, for Lee Hamilton, you're next.
I got a good morning. I wanted to make a comment on security. I'm a retired correction captain from New Jersey, and I was security captain. But notwithstanding that, it seemed to me that if we deny access to the cockpit, if nothing else, we will have much more success in controlling any attempt to hijack an airplane.
Well, I think the security person here that just called in has given us good advice. I don't know what all the steps will be to protect our airports and our airplanes, but my general sense is an agreement with the caller, and that is we're going to have to protect that cockpit much more carefully than we have in the past. I certainly have been on many, many flights when that door is open and shut a dozen times during the course of the flight. And those, at least in the front of the aircraft, can very easily have access to the cockpit. That probably is going to have to change.
Next call is Elmo, Washington. Good morning.
Good morning. I would like to make a statement and then ask a question. I would like my fellow Americans to consider the alternative to any inconvenience that we are going to suffer in the years to come. Consider the alternatives. And I would also like to ask Mr. Hamilton, like the last caller, what does he think of federalizing the airport security?
Well, first of all, your comment, I think, is right on the mark. We will have to put up with inconvenience. Takes me 15 or 20 minutes to enter the building I work in today because of security measures, and some people a little longer than that. We're certainly going to put up a lot of inconvenience as we travel. But you're quite right. We have to look at the alternatives, and we have to have patience and appreciation of what the security people